I think we've started outsourcing curiosity. That's a weird sentence. Let me explain. Apparently, the hardest part about moving to another country is walking into a supermarket. Immigration, fine. Selling your house, no problem. Crossing an ocean, it's easy. Looking for AA batteries? I'm fascinated by that question because I think it's pointing at something much bigger. The first instinct is to fire off a question to the group chat and wait for an answer. Any answer, which, to be fair, is exactly what the group's there for. But somehow leaving the apartment never enters the equation. If that sounded judgy, don't worry. That boomerang will be back for me in just a couple of minutes. Let's say you live across the street from this Spar market. If you walk in and miss the battery display, I'm genuinely concerned for your well-being. But when you ask where to buy batteries, somebody replies, Jumbo. Congratulations. You've just signed yourself up for a 20-minute walk across town. Every time I read a post like that, I find myself wondering, what's the worst that could happen if you just gone to the unfamiliar store? And then I realized that's the wrong question. The better question is this. What didn't happen because you asked the group instead of walking into that shop? At first glance, the answer is nothing. You got your batteries, problem solved, end of story, right? Except I don't think that's true. Because when you ask the group instead of walking into that shop, you don't just get an answer. You also skip an experience. Maybe absolutely nothing would have happened. You walk in, you buy the batteries, you go home. Fair enough. But maybe you discover there's a bakery next door you never noticed before. Maybe you stumble upon the spices and realize, oh, they don't come in little plastic jars here. Maybe you ask the cashier a question and learn your first Albanian word. None of those moments feel particularly important. That's exactly the point. Home isn't built from life-changing moments. It's built from lots and lots of ordinary ones. That's what didn't happen. Not something dramatic, just that one tiny thread that never got woven into your life. Now, before anybody says, Kevin, you're overthinking this, it's just batteries. You're right. It is just batteries. The batteries are innocent. The habit isn't. By the way, if these kinds of conversations are valuable to you, consider becoming a member. It's $5 a month and genuinely helps us keep making videos like this. You'll also get members-only videos, behind-the-scenes updates, and a place to chat with other members. If you'd like to be a part of what we're building, there's a join button right below the video. And look, yeah, I know. People are just asking for help. That's one of the best things about these groups. That's not what I'm questioning. I'm questioning what happens when asking becomes our first instinct. Because we all have something that makes us hesitate. For some people, it's the language. For me, it's something much dumber. Wendy loves wandering into little shops just to see what's there. I can turn that into an ethical dilemma in about 5 seconds. Wendy walks into stores because she's curious. I walk into stores because I've already decided to buy something, which means if she's just browsing, I'm already apologizing in my head. Takes me about 3 seconds to invent an entire emotional backstory for the shopkeeper. In my head, he's thinking, finally, a customer. It's just where my brain goes. Uninvited, I might add. And 20 seconds later, we smile, say thanks, and we walk out the door. Shopkeeper probably forgot we existed before we even reached the sidewalk. Meanwhile, I'm still silently apologizing for a crime that exists only in my mind. Which is ridiculous, because almost every time Wendy talks me into going in anyway, we end up finding something we didn't expect. And we often hit the sidewalk saying something like, well, now we know where to find zipper pulls. Satisfied that no matter what else goes wrong, at least we've got the zipper issue handled. Funny thing is, none of that happens if I get my way. The things we try hardest to avoid are often the very experiences that make a place start to feel like home. People like to say, it's time to get out of my comfort zone. Well, comfort zones are sneaky. They pack themselves into your suitcase and then quietly unpack themselves when you're not looking. Maybe feeling a little uncomfortable is a sign the process is working as it should. And that's exactly why I don't think this was ever about batteries. It's about what didn't happen. Think about it. Every time you walk into a place you've never been, your brain starts collecting information. You notice where the batteries are. You notice where they keep the spices. You notice what brands everybody else has in their baskets. A month later, you don't have to think about where the batteries are. 2 months later, you're the one giving directions. 6 months later, somebody recognizes you before you recognize them. That's how familiarity works. Almost invisibly. But if somebody else does all the noticing for you, what didn't happen? You never looked. You didn't build confidence. You didn't build familiarity. You didn't build intuition. You never got the chance to be surprised. After living somewhere for a year, you know what people tend to say? I finally feel like I know my way around. Nobody ever says it happened overnight, because it can't. It happens one tiny moment at a time. You get lost. You talk to a cashier. You walk 1 block further than you'd planned. None of those moments feels like a story until you look back. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly know your neighborhood. You earn it, one ordinary day at a time. And here's the thing. None of that can happen through somebody else's experience. You can borrow information. You can't borrow familiarity. Groups can be fantastic at facilitating transactions. I need something, where can I find it? Done. But walking out into the world doesn't just create transactions. It creates experiences. A few months after moving here, we were looking for a honing steel and a decent knife sharpener. Most of the smaller houseware shops around here don't have much of an online presence. So we tried asking at a few butcher shops without much success. Eventually, we stopped at Neptune. They didn't have one either, but one of the employees remembered us and directed us to a little shop a few blocks away. We nearly walked straight past it. If there was a sign, I never saw it. Half the inventory seemed to be on the sidewalk. We almost kept walking, but curiosity won. Inside, I found a 2-grit knife sharpener and a honing steel, both better quality than I expected and much more affordable than they would be in the States. While I was paying, the shopkeeper reached under the counter and pulled out a plastic bag full of fresh figs. Wendy loves fresh figs, so I reached for a couple. He shook his head, and he pushed the whole bag toward me. No, take them all. And now, whenever we need housewares, guess where we go first? It isn't Jumbo. And you know, the knife sharpener isn't why we still tell that story nearly a year later. The figs are. That's the difference between completing a transaction and having an experience. Hey, can I ask you a favor? On our last video, about 80% of the people watching were returning viewers, but only about half of them were actually subscribed. What's up with that? If you keep finding your way back here and you're enjoying what we're doing, we'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe. Despite the name, subscribing is completely free, and it helps us find the people who enjoy this sort of thing as much as you do. Okay, let's get back to it. Here's where this starts getting really interesting. Because our little knife sharpener story isn't unique. It happens every single day. Sometimes it's batteries. It could just as easily be coffee or apartments. What I'm calling out here is the pattern. Somebody asks where to buy batteries. Somebody answers, Jumbo. Great. End of conversation. Except it isn't. Because the next person who asks gets the same answer, Jumbo. Then the next person, and so on. Pretty soon, Jumbo isn't just a recommendation anymore. It's the answer. It isn't the only place. It might not even be the best place. It's just the answer that everyone accepts. And once something becomes the answer, people stop looking for other answers. Suddenly, the group isn't just answering questions anymore. It's quietly drawing a map. And every newcomer who joins inherits that map instead of drawing their own. Nobody intended this. Nobody even noticed it. That doesn't mean it isn't happening. Over time, newcomers stop discovering the town for themselves. They start seeing it through someone else's eyes. And that got me wondering, if enough of us stop discovering a place for ourselves, whose version of that place survives? Here's the strange part. Almost nobody moves to Albania because they want it to feel like America or wherever else they came from. But sometimes we spend an awful lot of energy trying to make it feel that way anyway. Not on purpose, almost never consciously. It's just comfort zones are sneaky. We stop asking, how do people do things here? And we start asking, how can I make this place feel more familiar? Every place has its own character, its own little quirks, its own rhythms. The question is, are we here to discover them or piece by piece reshape them into something more familiar? The temptation is to make your little corner of the map feel just a little bit more like the place you left behind. That's how it starts. Sometimes with entitlement, more often with perfectly understandable little decisions, made one at a time, almost invisibly. And I think this is the part that often goes unnoticed. Every recommendation on its own makes perfect sense. Every shortcut is reasonable. Every answer is helpful. But in the end, rather than exploring the town, you just follow the recommendations. You stop asking, what's here worth finding? And you start asking, where's everybody else go? Consensus is efficient. Discovery, not so much. Before long, your favorite cafe, your favorite restaurant, your favorite grocery store, all came from the same handful of recommendations. You haven't met your town. You've inherited somebody else's highlight reel. Sometimes we even have a name for it. Little America, Little Britain, Little Germany. I don't think most people cross an ocean hoping to build that. And look, there's nothing wrong with finding comfort. There's nothing wrong with helping newcomers. There's nothing wrong with having favorite places. The question isn't whether we should help each other. The question is, what disappears when discovery gets replaced by consensus? I think that's what I mean by outsourcing curiosity. Recommendations are borrowed. Discovery is earned. So, am I saying don't ask questions? Of course not. Ask questions. Ask lots of questions. And keep sharing what you've learned. Just don't outsource the part that was always supposed to belong to you. Before you ask where to buy batteries, try leaving your apartment first. Walk around the block. Wander into the little shops. Get lost on purpose. Buy the wrong thing once in a while. Ask the cashier instead of the internet. Turn down the street that wasn't part of the plan. Because every time you choose curiosity over certainty, you're giving something unexpected a chance to happen. Maybe you find a better bakery. Maybe you learn a few new words. Or maybe you find the exact thing that makes this place feel just a little less foreign. Expats love sharing stories about moving abroad. When I think about those stories, I've never heard one that began with, I asked the group chat where to buy batteries. Somebody said Jumbo, so I went to Jumbo. Nobody tells that story. They tell the story about the tiny shop they almost walked past, the shopkeeper who gave them a bag of figs, or the afternoon they got completely discombobulated and found their favorite cafe. Those are the stories we keep, because those are the moments when you stop visiting a place and start living there. Home isn't something you import. It's something you build, almost invisibly. Don't ask yourself, how do I make this feel like where I came from? Ask yourself, how do I make this new place my home?